He was the shadow behind the shield, the echo of a war that never truly ended. Bucky Barnes walked through time like a scar that refused to fade, a ghost with a heartbeat, a man-made weapon who still bled regret. His silence said more than his words ever could, and his eyes always looked like they were searching for something lost long ago. They called him the Winter Soldier, but that name was never his. It was forced on him, carved into bone and memory. A curse masked as purpose. Every mission rewrote him. Every trigger pulled erased another part of who he used to be. And when the world finally remembered his name, it was already too late to undo what had been done. Redemption is not a straight line. It twists, it breaks, it falters. And Bucky, he walked that path alone, burdened with guilt that was never truly his, haunted by faces he never chose to forget. He didn't just survive, he endured, and still, he was never allowed to rest. Even in peace, he was never given peace. Even in stories meant to heal, he was background noise. A relic used to prop up the next legacy. A man once feared, now forgotten. The pain never left his voice. It was just quieter, harder to hear over the jokes, the pacing, the distractions. But behind the jokes, behind the side glances and throwaway lines, there is still something sacred in Bucky Barnes. A soul aching to be seen, a journey begging to be finished. His story is not a subplot. It is a storm waiting for thunder, and the silence around him speaks louder than any monologue ever could. In this video, we explore how Marvel turned a man built on tragedy into a character left behind, how Bucky Barnes carried the weight of the MCU's most painful moments, only to be sidelined in his own survival, and why his unfinished journey still deserves to be told, to be honored, to be heard. He was more than a soldier, more than a sidekick, more than a memory stitched into another man's legacy. When Bucky Barnes re-emerged from the shadows, he wasn't just Steve Rogers' friend. He was a phantom of war, a relic with blood-stained hands and a haunted gaze. And we wanted to know everything about him. The Winter Soldier wasn't just a title, it was a scar. It was a name forged in silence, a name spoken in fear. His presence carried history, agony, transformation. The idea that a man could be broken and still return, still find purpose, was powerful. For a moment, the MCU treated him like more than background. His movements were poetry, his silence was thunder. Every scene with Bucky felt like it mattered, like it meant something beyond the mission. And we believed there was more to come, more stories waiting just beneath the metal and the pain. But then, time moved on, and the spotlight shifted, and Bucky, once a centerpiece of tension and heart, was slowly shuffled to the edge. He was present, but never central, watching from the wings, while others carried the weight of legacy. We kept waiting for the unraveling, for the healing, for the reckoning. But instead, we got breadcrumbs, fragments, glimpses of a man still trying to live in a world that had already moved on. Bucky deserved closure, not crumbs. He deserved an arc, not a cameo. A character built on torment and transformation should have been given a stage to breathe, to bleed, to break, and rise again. But the MCU never gave him space. They stripped his story of consequence, turned trauma into trivia. One moment he's confronting his past, the next he's cracking jokes at a cookout. There was no bridge between pain and peace, only silence, only neglect. Falcon and the Winter Soldier promised more, promised depth, promised reconciliation. But even then, Bucky felt secondary, a ghost in his own narrative, constantly reacting, never driving the story forward, always carrying shame, but rarely given voice. The complexity of his character was flattened. His guilt became a checklist, his growth a montage. And with every scene that passed, it felt like the MCU had forgotten the weight this man carried, the lives he took, the man he used to be. It's not just that Bucky was underused, it's that his pain was misused, repackaged for convenience, dressed in comedy, when what he needed was care. He never asked to be a weapon, never chose the silence or the shadows. They took a boy with hope in his eyes, and turned him into a ghost that bled silently through time. Bucky Barnes was a tragedy wrapped in steel, a man torn from history and stitched back together by violence. He was more than what they made him, but they never let him become more. Every friend he knew had died, every era he passed through left scars, and every day he woke up, he had to live with the weight of sins that were never his to begin with. That kind of grief doesn't vanish, it lingers, it claws at the soul. It's the kind of grief that deserves reverence, not reduction. And yet, they never let us sit with that, never let us feel the enormity of his loss. He was brushed aside, softened, turned into a punchline when he should have been treated like a survivor, like someone trying to find breath after drowning for decades. His story was whispered when it should have been shouted. There were moments, small, fragile, where the mask slipped, where we saw the fracture behind his eyes, the way he looked at Steve, the way he avoided mirrors. But those moments were fleeting, too brief to carry meaning, too thin to anchor the soul. They were echoes, not full songs. Bucky deserved silence that meant something. Grief that echoed, not laughter that erased him. Not storylines that treated him like an afterthought in his own resurrection. The man who lost everything should not be forgotten by the story that gave him back. He moved like thunder, fought like a myth, existed like a legend, caught between fire and frost. The Winter Soldier wasn't just a weapon, he was cinema incarnate. A ballet of brutality wrapped in silence. Each fight scene told a story, and each silence held more than words ever could. His battles were more than action. They were poetry written in violence. When Bucky faced Steve on that overpass, there was power in every glance. Every movement felt deliberate, every strike filled with heartbreak. That wasn't just combat, it was storytelling. A war between memory and programming. It was the kind of confrontation that defines a franchise. Few characters could command the screen like Bucky. Not because he spoke loudly, but because he didn't need to. His presence was enough. A reminder that pain can be beautiful, that struggle can be graceful, that redemption can wear metal and still feel human. He was the quiet gravity in a universe that often forgets to slow down. The choreography, the cinematography, the score, all of it elevated him, turned him into something elemental, a force caught between guilt and purpose. He wasn't just another character, he was a symbol of what it means to survive yourself. The screen bent around his silence, because his silence carried truth. That kind of presence is rare. That kind of weight is sacred. And yet, they let it slip away, like it was nothing. Like he was nothing. Like myth only mattered until it stopped being marketable. But there is still time, still space for a second awakening. Redemption doesn't come all at once. It comes in echoes, in choices, in second chances. Bucky's story isn't over. It's just paused, waiting for someone to listen, waiting for someone to believe he's worth the ink. There is power in giving a survivor the pen, letting him write his own ending. Bucky doesn't need more war. He needs a reason to live, not fight. A reason to walk through the world without guilt, dragging behind him like chains. He deserves a future, not just a past. Let him mentor, let him heal, let him build something of his own. His past is heavy, but his future can be full of grace, of meaning, of moments where he's not haunted, but whole. There's a version of his story that ends with peace, not pain. He's already shown he can evolve, shown he can care, shown that there is humanity still breathing beneath the winter. The pieces are there, scattered, bruised, but still intact. And each piece tells a story worth finishing. And if Marvel ever decides to truly honor him, there is still greatness waiting in those broken hands. Greatness that doesn't need applause, only attention, only respect, only time. But the truth cuts deep, deeper than most will admit. The world kept moving, and Bucky was left behind. Not because he lacked power, but because they never gave him purpose. He was a relic with a heartbeat, but no path. The tragedy isn't just that he suffered, it's that no one stayed long enough to see him heal. The screen moved on, the stories shifted, and the man who once shook the foundations of the MCU was reduced to fragments. He became a memory inside a machine that no longer remembered what made him human. They turned his silence into forgetfulness, his depth into decoration. And the worst part is, most viewers accepted it, laughed along, moved forward, never asking why the Winter Soldier never got to Thor, never asking why the arc was never finished. Legacy isn't about screen time, it's about weight, about what lingers when the story ends. And with Bucky, what lingers is the hollow space where his journey should have bloomed, but never did. The silence around him became louder than his presence ever was. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest injustice wasn't Hydra, wasn't the wars, wasn't the scars. It was that Bucky Barnes survived all of it, and still never got to be whole, and that, in a universe of gods and heroes, is the most human tragedy of all.